And that is interdependence, which I see as the balance between individualism and full collectivism. Get this closer. Hello. I'm Mist. You might have known me as Tommy growing up here around Beverly. And I'm very happy to be here. The name of my sermon is Setting Love Free. Gender is a social class and cultural construct. This system assigns to each of us a default set of social rules, expectations, and forms of expression we're meant to adhere to. These guidelines are scattered throughout our culture and language. Fight like a man. Women belong in the kitchen. Man up and take it. Women are too emotional to lead. Over time, these norms accumulate, teaching a child who they can and should be. Boys are given toy soldiers, girls toy dolls. Boys are told they are strong and smart, girls they are pretty and kind. Boys are taught to compete, girls are taught to socialize. These dynamics are reflected in our media, in the makeup of our society, in the people around us. As we grow up, these gender roles begin to be enforced. Little boys are shamed as girlish for crying. Little girls are scolded as bossy for speaking their mind. Similarly, we are told how and whom we are supposed to love. Love is between a single man and woman, with the primary purpose of having children. We create labels and slurs to identify those who diverge from social norms, who consistently fail to fit into these clearly defined guidelines. The queers. The further we diverge from these normative models, the more we are othered and shamed and ostracized, the more we are feared and scapegoated. We have been taught to police one another's expression and thought, to maintain the borders of a state of normalcy. No matter your identity, every one of us has experienced these social pressures, these spoken and unspoken norms which decide how we are supposed to express ourselves, who we are supposed to love, what roles we are supposed to fill. You have also witnessed some of the shame, the vitriol, the violence directed at those of us who exist outside of these boundaries. Right now, queer and trans people like myself are the targets of a surge in hatred and violence meant to enforce a dying norm. The recent hate crime at this very sanctuary is a testament to the fear that is now boiling over and which regularly burns my loved ones. This is the what of anti-queer fear and violence. But have you considered why? Why are they so afraid of my personal expression and relationships? Is there something larger than individual fears and prejudice at play here? Why do so many people see queerness as an existential threat? What does my existence threaten? Listening to the people engaged in this violence, their answers are quite clear. Queers are a threat to family values, to tradition, to the integrity of church and country, to the children. The things they care most about, the very core of their way of life, is at risk. On the surface, this seems demonstrably false and frankly impossible. How could the way I express myself, the people I choose to love, create such mass chaos? Why would my own way of life be a threat to theirs? What is stopping them from just continuing to live their own truth as I live mine? How could a tiny, impoverished minority cause such devastation? And yet, I can feel how serious they are about this, how much real fear and grief they're channeling into rage at me. Where is all that pain coming from? To truly understand, I must step back from my judgment and really listen with compassion. What are the real issues that have them so afraid? What are their actual sources? Let's first look at the family. Family is deeply important. As a communal species, kinship has always been at the core of our way of life. Extended familial networks have been the primary support system that raises us and keeps us going. Yet in today's America, the norm is isolation and division. Individualism is king. Families are increasingly scattered and distant. This is a very real and pressing issue. When I look for the systemic sources of this disruption, I don't have to look far. American society is rife with individualistic, competitive, anti-relational ideals and systems that are fundamentally incompatible with values and systems of kinship. Traditional extended families have been split up into tiny pieces so they can chase their own suburban fantasies. Our locations are decided by career, not kinship. No more multi-generational housing, no more raising children in community. Kids have one dad and one mom, not a village. No more caring for elders as they age. Young adults are expected to move out quickly and fend for themselves. We've been losing the vital support systems we once could rely on as our loved ones grow physically and emotionally distant. We grow up deprived of necessary care and mentorship and lifelong support because two adults cannot maintain a family. Modern neurology has confirmed what traditional cultures have long known. It really does take a village. But the nuclear family works well for a system that only values profit. The idealization of a self-sufficient small family unit fits neatly into the industrial workforce and feeds mass consumption. Rather than sharing skill sets and care and resources and housing in community, we have to pay strangers to supply them. Disconnected from relational support networks, we have to rely entirely on success in the market, competing for the right to have a home, to feed and clothe our families, to attain whatever privileges we can seize for ourselves. Principles of collective care, once at the very heart of family values, have been left at the wayside in favor of heartless ladder climbing and consumption. Queer and trans people feel this issue very starkly. We are doing our best to reweave webs of community care and collective responsibility from the broken strands that have been left to us. Many of my friends have been driven out of their blood families. Many more keep on attempting to maintain those relationships as family members just keep hurting and shaming and judging them. Pressuring people to change who they are is not family. Reactionary fear and punitive shame is not family. Control is not family. All of this demonstrates a genuine, deep disruption of family values. We live in a society that values judgment over compassion, a culture that teaches us to value rigid doctrines over the basic well-being, needs, and desires of the people we are supposed to love. And this goes deeper than the individual. A country with more prisons than hospitals has proven beyond all doubts that it values control over care. And what of tradition? Heritage is also deeply important. Our ancestral cultures carry vital wisdoms, rituals, art, oral histories that paint the picture of who we are and guide where we're going. Yet in today's America, the bulk of us are completely disconnected from our roots. White Americans cling to modern colonial conventions of the past century or two as tradition, in denial about the reality that we have abandoned our actual ancestries, our actual traditions, rituals that helped us align with nature's cycles, that connected us to our place in a greater world. Systems of healing and accountability and mentorship and kinship, thousands of years of land-based rituals and technologies, a rich body of myth and folklore and music filled with vital guidance for living in balance with nature, with each other, and with ourselves. How did we lose all that? Again, we can trace this crisis back to the true source, an oppressive colonial system that demands assimilation. Our ancestors were pressured to give up their cultures in many of the same ways that queers are now pressured to conform, ways that racial and ethnic minorities are targeted now. They were shamed and berated for their language, their clothes, their rituals, their food, any ways they differed from systemic norms. They were harassed and targeted by hate groups and police. They faced disproportionate incarceration, job discrimination, and wealth inequality. They were inundated with mass media portraying them as predators, as thieves, as the sources of society's ills. And so most gave in. They chose to become a part of the systemic norm. They were allowed to gain wealth and position, to experience the privileges of whiteness. And in return, they had to enforce it, to stamp down every part of themselves that was different, and to do the same to anyone else who dared diverge. This is how we lost our languages, our wisdoms and rituals of connection to ourselves and each other and the land. Our sacred traditions were whitewashed, boiled down to a day for raucous drinking and a bundle of half-assed stereotypes. The heart of who we are was turned into an empty commodity, an opportunity to sell us merchandise, a vague idea of ancestry. As a descendant of Irish, German, and Polish settlers, a core part of my own journey of self-discovery, decolonization, and spiritual liberation has been reconnecting to my own ancestral cultures. Nearly all of the queer folks in my social circles are engaged with this decolonial journey as well. We are seeking our true traditions, our true roots, in lieu of the ancestries, cultures, and histories of colonial violence and control that we have been sold as our own. We are discovering hidden ancestries of queer bards, healers, and seers who held a place of honor in pre-colonial societies. We are connecting to ancestries of resistance, those who fought to keep their cultures alive in a world that was becoming increasingly homogeneous, increasingly centrally controlled. Diversity is tradition. White is not an ancestry or a culture. It is the erasure of who we are. I ask any Irish Americans who believe themselves to be fighting to preserve tradition, Tá an Gaeilge agat? Do you celebrate La Bealtaine or St. Bridget's Day? Have you studied Irish histories of decolonial resistance? If so, then we queers are on your side, my friend. And to all of America's Christian traditionalists, do you know where your traditions come from? Have you studied Jewish law, culture, religion, to understand that Old Testament you quote? What did Jesus have to say about the poor, the meek, the oppressed? This moves us on to church and state, both in very real states of decay and facing systemic collapse. I witness both institutions crumbling under the weight of their own hypocrisy, their own disconnection from their explicit tenets and roots, the consequences of their own actions. Wealthy Christian institutions and charismatic leaders spew hatred in the name of a prophet of universal love, rake in billions in the name of a savior who condemned wealth, call for brutal judgment in the name of a martyr who died to end cycles of reactive violence. While numbers may be rising in some churches, their rhetoric has become increasingly distant from anything approaching the teachings of Jesus. Christianity has become a brand, a symbolic paint job politicians and businesses put on to sell product and seize authority. This is a church in deep crisis. I pray that more Christians can reconnect to the lived disciplines of universal love, forgiveness, and transformative justice I see at the heart of Christ's message. I personally find deep meaning and hope in this discipleship. Likewise, our nation is facing its own judgment day. America was founded on principles of life and liberty, using systems of colonial genocide and slavery. A nation of immigrants that violently enforces its borders. A free republic where elections are decided by campaign funds and corporate lobbyists write bills. The US military overthrows elected governments in the name of democracy, invades nations and funds apartheid in the name of a free world. I could go on. America is built on a beautiful dream that hides a violent, painful, oppressive reality. As the brilliant author Adrienne Marie Brown wrote, things are not getting worse, they are getting uncovered. We must hold each other tight and continue to pull back the veil. To those who have been integrated into these systems and cultures, who believe that our survival relies on them, this is terrifying. It is a difficult, painful reality to face. I've experienced myself that surge of grief and fear and despair. It feels like a life threat, the tearing down of these illusions we've grown reliant on. Realizing that the true sources of the pain all around us is the very systems we've been taught to rely on, that we've spent our lives maintaining. Queer people didn't cause any of this. We simply force you to face it. We hold up a mirror to the reality you've been fighting to ignore. When we question and disrupt the boxes we've been put in, you start to realize that you've been one. And by choosing a different path, we prove that another way is possible. That we don't need to live as this society demands. That assimilation is a choice that we make every day, that we can have worlds rooted in love and freedom, if we can embody and nurture those worlds in ourselves, in our communities, in every way that we can, that there are no necessary evils, only justifications for it. And this gets to my final point, the children. Conservatives are shocked by rapidly growing rates of queer and radically divergent identity, expression, and thought among youth. They believe we must be grooming them, that there is some secretive plot to steal their children. They fail to recognize the true reason for this mass exodus. Kids don't buy their bullshit anymore. They are waking up to the countless hypocrisies of the systems we live in. They're witnessing people publicly live their own truth, forge their own path, and realizing they could do the same. They're facing that we don't have a future in this world, and taking that as a chance to imagine and embody and create new ones. Worlds where our genitals don't decide who we're allowed to be or love. Worlds rooted in care over control, autonomy over authority, cooperation over competition. Worlds where we can decide our own destiny. Queerness isn't any one ideology. There are countless ways to diverge from existing systems and genders and ways of being. I know many people in the LGBTQ plus spectrum would disagree with my own framing of queerness, and that's okay. Because to me, the core tenet of queerness is that there is no one way. Be curious. Explore different identities and expressions and ways of being and worldviews. Don't let anyone tell you what you're supposed to love. Discover what resonates most with your own passions, your own perspective. Unleash your imagination and creative potential. Create your own worlds in community with those whose visions align with your own. So there we have our answer, or at least mine. This is why we are feared. Queers threaten to shatter the illusions that have built up around us. We represent possibilities beyond the known, beyond what can be controlled. By embracing vulnerability and universal love, we can grow deep connections with people of all genders. By embracing communal values and models of kinship, we can grow extensive familial networks of collective care. In experimenting outside of dominant paradigms, we are discovering that no systems can exploit us when we can support each other in community. And we don't need rigid doctrines when we live in direct relationship with spirit and with nature. That love is deeper than man and woman, deeper than blood, deeper than marriage or procreation or any rigid ideas of what family can mean. Love is the root of all existence. And when we dig up the concrete that has bound our love, those roots can grow free, and new worlds can begin to rise. Thank you.
We're now going to sing hymn number 305, De Colores. You may join us by standing if you are willing and wish.